still has not struck Shedeur, the Colorado product, on the board with 102 picks having come and gone. Adding insult to uncertainty, 3 more QBs selected on day 2, bringing the total to 5. On to day 3, Sanders still available. For more, we check in with CBS lead NFL insider Jonathan Jones. JJ, we did not expect to be here, but here we are. Tell me what you're hearing from around the league, how we got here.
This, Joe, is a repudiation by the NFL of how Shedeur Sanders and those around him handled the entire NFL draft process. What you are not going to tell me, or really anyone who watches football, is that Shedeur Sanders is a worse quarterback than Dillon Gabriel, who was selected in the 3rd round of the NFL draft. Look, I didn't think that Shedeur Sanders was going to go in the 1st round of the NFL draft. I thought, and in talking with teams, they told me that he was a 2nd round quarterback. 2nd round comes around. I start calling around today. At the start of the draft, I learned he's probably not going to go in the top 10 of the 2nd round. Okay, that's fine. At some point in there, in talking with NFL evaluators, they believed that at some point in the 2nd round, he would eventually be selected in the 2nd round. Then the 3rd round comes. And as we know, of course, he's not selected at all on Friday night. And so when you look at this, you say that Shedeur Sanders, you see that Shedeur Sanders was clearly talented enough to be selected in the top 5 when it comes to quarterbacks, right? He was a top 5 quarterback in this year's class. Not a great class, not a class that had many 1st rounders, but he was one of the 5 best quarterbacks in this NFL draft. You're not going to convince me otherwise of that. But the difference here is how he and those around him handled the draft process. Let's go back even a year ago when his father, Deion Sanders, one of the greatest athletes of modern times, was saying, look, we might pull an Eli. Which, of course, he was referring to how Eli Manning ultimately didn't go to the San Diego Chargers and then engineered, along with his father, a way to go to the New York Giants 2 decades ago. And then his tune changed over the next year, right? But then what continued to happen? He would tweet after every Las Vegas Raiders loss, thank you, God. And it seemed like the Raiders were destined for the #1 overall selection. It seemed like he was trying to engineer his way to the #1 pick on a team that was co-owned by Tom Brady. And then the New York Giants, maybe they get the #1 pick, or they're going to be up top. And so he has the New York Giants colored cleats. And then we get to the combine, and no, he does not throw, which is not uncommon for top quarterbacks these days. But in some of those meetings, and we reported this at the NFL Scouting Combine in Indianapolis, at some of those meetings with certain teams that maybe Shedeur Sanders didn't really want to go to, didn't see himself going to for any number of reasons. Maybe they had a starting quarterback installed there. I was told that he more or less sandbagged in those interviews. I don't know if he didn't take them seriously, what it was, but he did not give it his all in some of those interviews. Rubbed some teams the wrong way. And so then you continue where it was a pro day that frankly was just sort of average. I'm not saying it was bad, it wasn't great, it was average. And so more and more it continues. He gets his number, his jersey number retired. His father retires his jersey number at Colorado. That is something that's really just not seen in major college football, how quickly it was done, and considering the lack of accolades in his career. All of these things began to add up for teams. And I'm not saying that is right that it added up for teams. What I'm saying is it did clearly add up for teams, because you're not going to tell me that the guy who was on the field the last 2 years for Colorado wasn't good enough to be selected by the end of the 2nd night, wasn't good enough to be selected over a Dillon Gabriel, with all due respect to Dillon Gabriel. So this is clearly a way for the NFL and its teams to let him and anyone else after him know you can't comport yourself in this way moving forward.
It certainly feels like, as we head to day 3, penance paid if penance was required here. And maybe there is something to be said about the 3rd day and thanking God, because Vegas is still the one we might have circled, JJ. When might that appetite return for Shedeur Sanders on day 3, if at all?
Yeah, I mean, I understand the question, Joe, and I know that you have to ask the question, and you also know, because you've sat here and you've watched this as well, and you, I have to assume, have thought, well, he's going to go at some point, and he hasn't. So I'd love to be able to be the lead NFL insider at CBS Sports and tell you exactly where he's going to go on Saturday. I don't know. I mean, go down the list right here, right? You knew that Tennessee wasn't going to take him at 1. You knew they were going Cam Ward. Okay. Cleveland, they had 5 picks, and they did not take Shedeur Sanders, right? Their quarterback room was Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett, and an injured Deshaun Watson, who may never play football for the Cleveland Browns again. And with their 5th selection overall in their draft, they took Dylan Gabriel. The Pittsburgh Steelers, right? How much did Mike Tomlin just talk up Shedeur Sanders earlier this week? They've had a couple of picks so far, did not take Shedeur Sanders. Surely they know something about Aaron Rodgers and how he is ultimately going to come to Pittsburgh. Point being, they talked up Shedeur Sanders a lot for someone that they didn't think was worthy of a top 90 pick when they had 2 of them. The New York Giants, of course, passed on him at 3, then traded future capital to trade up to get Jackson Dart, even though they had been scouting Shedeur Sanders for 2 years. The New Orleans Saints, they had 2 picks, and then at number 40 went with Tyler Shuck, 25 going on 26-year-old quarterback with uncertainty with Derek Carr. You have the Seattle Seahawks, right, who went out there with 4 picks, and out on their 4th pick, went out and got Jalen Milroe. Probably has a higher ceiling than Shedeur Sanders. Not probably, definitely does. Who knows if we will ever reach that ceiling for him. And so you mentioned the Las Vegas Raiders. They've picked 5 times. They've passed on him every single time. Could he ultimately be selected by the Raiders? Sure. Yeah. I mean, any of these teams at this point, somebody could, because the value you would think would be there. But those are a ton of picks for a quarterback. This is the most important position in professional sports. This is a position where not that long ago, when Brock Purdy was taken in the 7th round, and around that time, we all kept saying, man, you just got to take quarterback every year. You never know. It's so important. How many GMs get fired because they don't get the quarterback position right? So make sure that you are always insulated. All of these teams that very clearly need backup quarterbacks have said time and again, we don't need Shedeur Sanders. And not just need, we don't want Shedeur Sanders. And so we'll see on Saturday where he goes. If it's the 4th, if it's the 5th, at this point, no one should be surprised either where he goes or when he goes, because surprise is out the window.
Opportunity and need have presented themselves multiple times, to your point here, and still no selection of Shedeur Sanders. NFL insider Jonathan Jones, appreciative always of your hard work. Thank you, friend. Here's a look at Shedeur's ranks, which only amplify the statements made there by Jonathan Jones. It's the highest completion percentage in a single season in FBS history. Yet and still, we head to day 3 with Sanders available. Draft coverage continues here on CBS Sports HQ. Shedeur and beyond. We assess all we saw and didn't see on day 2 of the NFL Draft. Day 2 of the NFL Draft in the can. It is, in fact, a quarterback's world, and at the center of some of those worlds, 3 more on day 2. Shuck, Milroe, and another, hearing their name called in Gabriel, the name we have not heard